Joining me to discuss this is Governance Advisor and Forensics Auditor, Professor Peter Goss. Thank you for being with us, Prof. Firstly, the President last year released one of his weekly newsletters saying that bold action would be taken, that the SIU findings would be a turning point. Now it seems like little has been done. What does that suggest about those promises and where we are? Does this add insult to injury?
I think you sum it up perfectly. It is insult to injury when we speak of looking to the NPA to make a decision about this particular report now to address the shortcomings identified. We just had a report recently from the Zondo Commission, State Capture Commission of Inquiry, reflecting on challenges with procurement. Now, this is just the last 24 months of the COVID-19 pandemic, and one particular focus, which is commodities relating to PPE in the COVID-19 pandemic. What it tells you is our problem goes further back than, for example, just 10 years of so-called state capture. It is backwards of that 10 years and forwards of that 10 years, and right now under current leadership. The solution here has got to be leadership stepping up and taking actions other than mainstream actions. What's mainstream action? Mainstream action is expecting law enforcement to solve your systemic problems. The NPA, the police, the SIU will not solve systemic problems. They'll gather or develop for us more bills. We've got R1 billion on state capture investigation. We've got 300 million rand on this investigation, and we have no sign of who will go to jail when. So jail is not the primary solution here, it seems to me. It's got to be hitting these people in the pocket where it hurts most.
What about, some people say the entire system in South Africa is broken. We should relook at tenders. We should relook at procurement. Although, bearing in mind for COVID-19, this was emergency procurement. So a lot of the rules that are in place were allowed to be flouted for an emergency. Are those rules that are in place sufficient when they are used?
Well, emergencies don't last 2 years. And emergencies last for a moment. You figure what the solution is for similar emergencies, and you develop a protocol for those emergencies. Now, in the public procurement system, the protocol for emergencies is quite rigid. And included in that rigidity is hiring companies that do exist and can provide the service. It doesn't provide for hiring companies just opened for the service. It doesn't provide for hiring companies in which public office bearers, politicians, and other parties have vested interests. It doesn't include backhand transactions to favor parties and not comply. So public procurement contains stringent provisions for how to go about emergency procurement. Emergency doesn't mean no process.
Yeah.
Emergency means a certain kind of process recorded in the state's policies and procedures.
And we now know that about two-thirds of cases, those policies, those procurement rules were flouted. You talk about systemic problems and the need to get the money back, but we know one of the big problems is capacity and skills in municipalities. Some of them are struggling to survive, never mind pay the people who have to come up with very advanced tender processes, put the tenders out to make sure that the companies comply. Is that a huge problem and seemingly not one that we can fix overnight in the first place?
I don't believe that the process is the sum total of our problem. It's the people in the process. One of the critical matters missing in the process is who governs the process. There's no independence in the governance of the process. Somebody who concludes emergency as necessary, overrides the due emergency process, and goes about procuring from a crony, a family member, a related party. So we need more independence in the process, I think is part of the solution. I just no longer believe that a new process is necessary. What we need is new controls over an existing process. This process for public procurement in South Africa is as good as any in the world. What's missing is those applying it, and their integrity.
Well, now there's a recommendation that the president issue a directive for progress reports, because even where officials have been found to be wanting and they need a disciplinary process, sometimes their superiors aren't following through. So the president can try and sit on these municipalities, but like you say, then it's not really dealing with the fundamental issues.
I dispute that the president has a role to play in solving this problem for us. With all respect, I don't think any politician has helped us solve any of these problems. In fact, they've caused more of these problems for us. I think that those we entrust with the authority to control, public officials, overseen by independent parties like NPO organizations, like the Public Protector, more proactively, like the SIU, more proactively. So we've got to start giving these organs of state more authority, these oversight organs more authority to be more proactive. The biggest glaring gap in the anti-corruption arena around procurement is the lack of a proactive input over the oversight into the procurement processes. What does that mean? More often than not, you'd find that when procurement should be of a certain value and upwards, you need probity oversight of that process. That probity must be independent. In Treasury regulations, that probity is provided for. What's happening is nobody's applying that probity, and there's no independence on that probity.
Are there funds in municipalities, say, for that? In provincial governments, are the people in place to do that?
There are funds for corruption. I think we just need to redeploy funds to control too. So if we can make funds available for corruption, we can certainly make funds available for control and oversight, independent control and oversight.
And you're saying that the rules are clear enough, because, we know that politicians and their families should not be involved. We hear of that case by case. We hear of tenders being extended because a politician likes a certain company. So you're saying that the problem is always the people. The rules are very clear. If we just follow the rules, we wouldn't see cases like that at all.
And we establish independence over those we entrust with these public funds, dynamic, proactive independence. What we have now is the official responsible for the procurement, the politician who may be able to influence the procurement, and he will claim that he cannot influence the procurement. I argue that politicians do and can influence procurement. We see it every week in the newspapers. I think what you need now is an independent leg to oversee and monitor the procurement process. Look, you may make some finer, nuanced refinements to the procurement policy, yes, but that nuanced refinement must be incorporating some level of independence, somebody who has absolutely no interest in who wins a contract, but that the best person wins the contract with the best capacity for the best turnaround time and the best price. Yeah. That's still missing. The policy says so. We don't have the bodies looking after the policy.
I'm interested in your view on a certain quandary. For instance, with the health department, the scandal that brought down the minister there was a company in place and they were then given COVID-19 responsibilities. I know some governmental departments, to stop kind of the cushy relationship that can develop if a company is in place for many years, they actually insist on rotating suppliers. But then you don't have suppliers who've built up expertise, who are doing the job well, who can then continue. How do you deal with something like that?
Once again, due process does not remove from the fact that somebody who's competent in the past may be competent in the future. But due process means you can't keep giving one person a contract, no matter how good or not good that person might be. You've got to give them a fair chance of access. And when they don't perform, don't include them in the future. So your logic about making sure we have some continuity in the quality of service is important. But we have an open, transparent, fair, equitable, cost-effective procurement process. That means every time we procure, we must make sure that those rules in the Constitution, Section 217, are complied with. So we can't close the door to others because one person was good. There is, however, provision for developing what we call contracts that will enable us to procure from one party after undergoing an intense procurement process. It's called a transversal contract. An intense procurement process to procure someone who is competent for various reasons, for various kind of contexts over time. So we don't have to keep going through the procurement process every year. We can appoint someone for a 3-year contracted period, for example. So you may have contracts for long terms to mitigate against the risk of having to go out on procurement every time you need something. There are transversal contracts that allow for procurement from one organization across multiple organs of state through one tender process.
All right, so saying the system is not broken, but it needs oversight to ensure that people follow the rules in place. That was governance advisor and forensic auditor, Professor Peter Goss. Thank you for your time.